guys, how are you? Welcome to our channel. Right, last time we talked about the different types of real estate that you can invest in, right? In this video, we're going to be talking about the stages of developing real estate, not just the construction. Construction is one of the stages. Here I'm talking about the stages of developing real estate, not construction. We're going to make another video on the stages of construction. Construction is a phase in the development of real estate, but it also is made up of many phases or stages. Right. So the first thing when you want to develop real estate is to understand the idea that you want to implement. What do? This is what we call idea inception. That is number one. What is it that you want to develop? You want to develop a standalone house? You want to develop a small cottage? You want to develop a multi-story building? You want to develop an apartment block? Things like that. That's the idea. The idea must be based on the location and the type of people that you are targeting. It's not every type of building which suits every place, but every place has a certain type of building that suits that place. And every demographic, in other words, the type of people who live there, has got a certain type of real estate that suits that population. For example, if you are developing property for students, it would be best maybe to invest in a multi-story apartment block with small rooms and put beds and put Wi-Fi, all sorts of things, wardrobes and possibly a library and a gym in there. But if you just build an average house, maybe not so suitable for students, but although you can work around it. So the first thing is idea inception. What is your idea? The second one is idea refinement. You now want to be more accurate about the idea that you conceived in your mind, to say, how exactly am I going to implement this? Yes, I want to build student accommodation, or yes, I want to build an office building, but how am I going to put it all together? Right. In other words, we are saying, if you're going to develop student accommodation, is it going to be one student per room? Is it going to be shared between two students or more? Is it going to be each room its bathroom, or a certain number of rooms sharing one bathroom? That is now refinement of the idea. If I'm going to do it, where exactly am I going to do it? Right? Obviously, if it's student accommodation, it needs to be close to an institution which has got students, right? If it's an office building, probably next to in the CBD, or just outside on the outskirts, depending on the kind of clients you're targeting. Maybe you're targeting private doctors, lawyers, accountants who have got their own private practices. Okay, that could be now the idea of refining what you're thinking of. Right. The third thing is feasibility. Feasibility is very important, guys. How applicable, how practical is this idea that I have? Can it really be implemented and make me money? Can it really be implemented and make sense? That is feasibility. Many people have developed properties which turned out to be too good for the place where they developed them, or which were of a standard that's too low for the place where they developed it, and then they didn't do so well. So feasibility is very important, guys. Get expert feedback. Look at the barriers, the possible barriers in the area where you want to invest. Don't just rush. Now, once you are very certain that this is a feasible project and you have refined your idea, which you conceived at first, the next thing is you need to negotiate contracts. Contract negotiation. This is where you start to engage with a number of people. The architect who is going to draw your plan, the municipality where you are going to be building your project. You get the necessary permits. You negotiate the charges that are involved in the process. This is a very, very key part, because if it is not done properly, it will cost you a lot of money. Remember, every other stage that we have talked about prior to this point, there's very little money needed, if at all. Alright? And prior to this point, you are just using your brains and looking at the environment. You haven't committed any cent. But now at this point, this is where you are bringing in other people's wisdom, and you are about to pay them for the wisdom that they give. Right? So that is very, very important, negotiating contract. Right? The fifth one is, now after you have negotiated, you now need to get you into a final commitment. Yes, it's one thing to talk about saying, okay, I want to hire you as my builder, or I want to hire you as my architect, or I want to hire you as my lawyer to manage my portfolio, or my agreements with contractors, and draft those. It's one thing, but it's also a different thing to actually then commit to say, this is finally my builder, or this is finally where I am building or to say, this is the municipality that I'm going to work with. So, very important, you need to formalize everything. Put it in writing, get it signed, get it stamped, and filed. This is where it might be necessary to engage your lawyers and other experts, right? Especially your lawyers, because there's a risk that if you enter into an agreement and there are loopholes in that agreement, you might find yourself losing out on a lot of money. If your agreement has got loopholes, someone might exploit those loopholes against you. Very important, we need to be careful about those things. The next thing, which I said, is where most of us are interested. That is the construction phase, number 6. Most of us rush to construction or are interested much on the construction more than anything. But if you construct without carrying out these other things which I've talked about, your construction might actually prove to be a very costly exercise. Why? I think you have seen people who built houses on land that was never theirs to begin with, on land that was never approved for development in the first place, on land that is not structurally strong or sound enough to have buildings. And then you are told that no, this land does not belong to you, it belongs to somebody else. We all know those situations. We don't want to get into that. But construction is where everyone rushes to without actually considering the problems that are associated with construction, without formalizing the whole process before, right? This is where we expect you to, or where you're expected to respond as early as possible to any kind of concerns that your contractors might raise. If they say, we have a problem with this, there's this challenge, please, you should quickly respond and address those problems, because those problems might actually cost you. This is the phase where you don't want to cut corners, because any corners that are cut in the process will cost you in the long term. All right. So we need to be very careful. We need to be very careful if you are investing in property, or even if you are doing it for yourself. Remember, whether you're doing it for yourself, you're building for your own family, or you're developing it for making money, you still are using money in the whole process. So that is very, very important. You also need to monitor and ensure that everything stays on schedule, because any project that then runs out of schedule is very costly. All right. Number 7, completion and final. Okay, we're assuming that the project has been finished. You've built your student accommodation, or you've built your own standalone house, or it's a cottage. The next thing is completion and final opening. Now, this is where most of the hard work has been done. Usually what you now need is just certificates of occupants, marketing in order to attract new residents, and long-term property management. So we're saying you have already done most of the difficult work, but you now need to make sure that everything is well taken care of beyond just construction. So you have a certificate of occupants to say this is now legally occupied by so and so and is the owner. Okay, you now need to do another thing which is called marketing. With a lot of people offering your service, it's always a challenge to get noticed unless your property really stands out in many ways. A property can stand out in terms of its pricing, it can stand out in terms of its location, it can stand out in terms of its facilities, right? Marketing is very, very crucial. Make sure that you do it very, very well. Okay. Then the long-term property management. This is where most of us fail. We think that a house is like a mountain, right? Once it's there for generations, and there's nothing you need to look at. That is actually wrong. A house needs attention, preferably every year, very least every year. Okay? Check your ceilings, check your pipes, check your electricals, the paving. There are some things that need weekly inspection, like your lawn, your flowers, those things require attention almost every. And there are things that require attention once every month, or once every few weeks, or once every year. So it's very important to know exactly what you need to look at whatever point in time. Okay, the last thing, which is number 8, is the property management. Property management is not an easy thing, guys. This is a broad term, all right? But it covers things like rental collection and building maintenance. Rental collection sounds very simple. Okay, month end is coming and they pay me. But it's not that simple, right? Because there's someone who's going to come to you with an excuse a day before they're supposed to pay and tell you that their cousin or their uncle or their wife has died. Therefore, they need another week, an extension of a week. Right? What do you do? And it's always them who come to you every month with one problem or the other. What do you do about that? Very important to find a solution to that. Your rent collection should preferably be done by someone you trust if you are not the one who does it. Because there's always, struggles that always happen and come out. After someone has been given money, they say, no, you didn't give me this much, you gave me this much, or you didn't give me at all. And then you have a standoff. That is not the situation we want. Okay, you want to make sure that from month to month you don't have headaches on where the money went and how was the money used, or if at all it was paid. Right. Very importantly, guys, I said under property management, which is our last phase, there's also maintenance, which I've already touched in a small way. Right. You're going to have a lot of things that require maintenance. If you've got solar panels, they need to be cleaned. If you've got water pipes, they need to be checked here and right. Mentioned the lawn. If you have a swimming pool, there's a whole lot of things. There's rain that washes away the soil. Paint deteriorates with time due to exposure to weather elements. All those things require our attention. There are certain floors that need to be polished. Your tiles need to be cleaned every other day. Maintenance is very important. Guys, do not leave your tenants to manage everything. Make sure that every few months you ask for permission to inspect their house or the house they live in, or their home, whatever the case. You might find someone has hit a nail into your wall. You might find someone is cooking and their stove is, producing heat and some splashes of oil are coming out of their pot and the wall is dirty and greasy. So those are all problems that you might encounter in the process of managing your real estate. But if managed well, those things can easily be a very simple exercise, especially if people get into your rental property already knowing what is required of them. Okay, they don't assume certain things. Make sure the rules are clear and what will happen to anyone who violates those rules. Alright guys, that's it for today. Let's meet next time. Our next video is gonna be about construction. Remember, we discussed the 8 phases of real estate development, but not the building of the house itself. We covered everything from the idea to the point where you are now managing a completed house. But our next video, we're going to be talking about construction. Right? Construction is the most difficult part and the most important one. It also has its own stages. From the point where you mark the ground, you do a set out, you dig the trenches of the foundation, the point where you start staying there. Alright, those are all stages. We are going to be talking about those next time. And until then guys, bye-bye.